November 15th, 2019. 11:43 p.m. A truck stop diner outside Raleigh, North Carolina. 4 old men sit in the back booth under flickering fluorescent lights. No phones on the table, no witnesses in earshot, no records of this meeting. The youngest is 71 years old. Between them lies a faded manila envelope. Inside, a handwritten map on the back of a 1978 tobacco auction receipt. The ink is brown. The paper is brittle, but the coordinates are still visible. $50 million. Not in crypto. Not in some Swiss account the feds can freeze with a phone call. $50 million in physical cash, buried in North Carolina soil, untouched since Frank Lucas whispered the location to his most trusted Lieutenant 41 years ago. These are the last of the country boys, the rural North Carolina cousins who became Frank Lucas's invisible backbone. While Nicky Barnes posed for magazine covers, the country boys moved heroin like ghosts. No gold chains, no Bentleys, no noise, just discipline, just loyalty, just silence. The man on the left speaks first. His name is Tommy Briggs. Lung cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 2 months. That was 3 months ago. He lights another Marlboro because dying slow beats living broke. Frank said we earned it. Tommy rasped. Said the money was for the soldiers who stayed quiet. The man across from him shakes his head. Ray Smoke Lucas, Frank's cousin, the ghost who never spent a single night in federal custody. For 40 years, he's been the keeper of secrets, the guardian of the code. Frank's been dead 6 months, Smoke says. You think his ghost is going to protect you when the feds start digging? The third man, Carl Dupree, slides the map closer. His hands shake, not from fear, from desperation. His grandson needs surgery. $30,000. Carl's got maybe $800 in his checking account. I kept the code for 40 years, Carl whispers. I never talked, never flashed, never broke, but my blood is dying and I got nothing to save him with. The fourth man says nothing. His name is Jerome Heavy Johnson. He's called Heavy because he carried the weight, literally. The muscle. The enforcer. The one who made problems disappear. Heavy doesn't speak often, but when he does, people die or people live. He taps the map with one thick finger. You dig up that money, Heavy says, and you wake up every ghost from here to Harlem. Frank buried it for a reason, not for spending, for resurrection. Tommy coughs blood into his napkin. He doesn't look at it anymore. I'm dead either way, Tommy says. At least this way I die rich. Carl looks at the map, then at his phone, a text from his daughter about medical bills. Then back at the coordinates that could save his grandson's life or cost them all their freedom. If we do this, Smoke says, we break the last rule Frank ever gave us. Heavy leans back, closes his eyes, thinks about 1978, about coffins filled with heroin, about the price of being invisible in a world that rewards the loud. Then we better make sure, Heavy says, that we're the only ones who know we broke it. Harlem, 1970. The streets pulse with ambition and bleed with ego. Every corner crowns a king. Every king flashes a crown. Every crown becomes a target. This is the theater of power where loud men die young and quiet men build empires. Nicky Barnes owns the spotlight. Chinchilla coats in summer heat, magazine covers, penthouse parties. He wants to be seen, heard, remembered. Barnes thinks visibility equals invincibility. He's wrong. In the underworld, celebrity is just expensive suicide with better press coverage. Frank Lucas operates in the shadows. While Barnes poses for photographers, Frank moves $1 million in heroin every week through a network nobody can see. No gold chains, no social clubs, no interviews, just discipline, just silence, just results. The secret isn't the product. The secret is the invisibility. Frank needs ghosts. The city breeds rats. Harlem hustlers talk too much, flash too hard, break too easy. The Italians are sloppy, comfortable, dependent on old systems that leak information like broken pipes. Frank looks south, back to the red clay and tobacco fields of North Carolina. He calls for blood. He calls for the country boys. Tommy Briggs arrives first. Hands scarred from tobacco leaves, eyes that have seen poverty measure itself in pennies. Then Carl Dupree, built like a tree trunk, quiet as morning fog. Jerome Heavy Johnson follows, carrying muscle and silence in equal measure. Finally, Ray Smoke Lucas steps off a Greyhound bus wearing work boots and carrying everything he owns in a duffel bag. These aren't street soldiers. These are Frank's cousins. His blood. Men who understand that loyalty isn't negotiated, it's inherited. They grew up in country where flash gets you noticed by people you don't want noticing you, where silence isn't strategy, it's survival. Frank sits them down in a Harlem backroom that smells like cigarettes and ambition. He explains the architecture of invisibility. 3 laws. Never talk. Never flash. Never trust outsiders. The country boys don't just follow these laws, they worship them. Law 1 means conversations happen only between blood. No girlfriends, no drinking buddies, no exceptions. Law 2 means you make $1 million, you go home and eat a bologna sandwich. Success stays invisible. Law 3 means the city seduces you, then kills you. Stay country. Stay alive. The system works like clockwork. While the Italians tax black dealers for selling watered-down European heroin, Frank imports pure blue magic directly from Southeast Asia. The country boys move product through Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. They drive pickup trucks with North Carolina plates. They wear denim and work boots. To law enforcement, they look like farmers, like nobodies, like ghosts. By 1975, the numbers become impossible to ignore. Frank's operation clears $1 million per week in pure profit. The country boys handle half that volume, moving 200 kilos monthly through tobacco country. Law enforcement doesn't know their names. The DEA doesn't have their photographs. They are the invisible backbone of an empire built on discipline. But gravity always wins. By 1977, the federal heat intensifies. Detective Richie Roberts circles closer. Task forces multiply. Informants whisper. Frank feels the walls closing. He's not stupid. He knows every empire falls. But Frank Lucas didn't build a kingdom just to watch it disappear into evidence lockers. September 1977. A tobacco barn outside Greensboro. No phones, no witnesses, no records. Frank sits across from his 4 disciples. Between them, $50 million in cash. Not drug money. Pure profit. Skimmed clean over 2 years, converted into untraceable bills. Frank slides a hand-drawn map across the wooden table. Crude coordinates based on tobacco rows and auction house foundations. The location where resurrection sleeps. This money isn't for spending, Frank says, voice cutting through cricket songs and distant highway hum. It's for surviving. When this empire falls, and it will fall, you let it stay buried until everyone who could hurt you is dead or forgotten. The country boys don't ask questions. They don't negotiate terms, they just nod. Because loyalty isn't a transaction. Loyalty is identity. Frank looks at each man individually. You don't touch it when you're broke. You don't touch it when you're desperate. You don't touch it until the ghosts stop hunting. January 1978. The hammer falls. DEA agents kick down doors in Teaneck, New Jersey. Frank Lucas hits the floor, handcuffs cutting into his wrists, an empire shattering around him like broken glass. As they drag him toward the door, Frank locks eyes with Smoke, standing invisible in the crowd of onlookers. No words needed. Just understanding carved in blood and tobacco smoke. "Remember the tobacco barn," Frank whispers. "Remember the rule. And if I die before I come back for it, Make sure only the worthy survive to claim it. The doors close. The king disappears. But the throne stays buried, waiting for resurrection or ruin. Silence starts light. Feels like freedom when the handcuffs click and the sirens fade, but silence has gravity. Give it years, give it decades, and it gets heavy enough to crush a man's spine. After Frank Lucas falls in 1978, the country boys don't run. They evaporate. They become the background static of America. Tommy Briggs goes south to the Florida Keys, trading heroin routes for fishing lines. He captains a 30-foot charter boat named Second Chance that leaks oil and optimism in equal measure. Tourists pay him $40 to catch snapper and grouper while he smiles, nods, and pretends he's never seen $1 million in cash. Every sunset over Key West, Tommy calculates the distance to North Carolina. 637 miles. 14 hours of driving. 50 million reasons to break his word. He drinks bourbon instead of driving north, medicating the weight of coordinates burned into his memory like a brand. Carl Dupree climbs into the cab of a Peterbilt 18-wheeler and disappears into America's arteries. Interstate 95 north to south. Interstate 40 east to west. Hauling frozen chickens, paper products, anything legal and boring. His daughter grows up knowing his voice through payphone static and birthday cards postmarked from truck stops. She doesn't understand why Daddy can't afford dance lessons when other fathers buy their daughters everything. Carl understands too well. Every night in a different parking lot, he stares at the North Carolina section of his road atlas and measures the distance to resurrection. 4 hours. 4 hours between poverty and betrayal. Jerome Heavy Johnson vanishes into the Blue Ridge Mountains, buying a cabin with cash saved from the Empire days. No phone lines. No neighbors within 5 miles. No witnesses to his conversations with ghosts. People in town call him the crazy hermit who shoots at trespassers. But Heavy isn't crazy. He's disciplined. He trusts wind and wildlife more than humans because trust is the currency that purchases betrayal. He lives on canned beans and hunted venison, knowing that $50 million sleeps 30 miles away, knowing that comfort kills more men than bullets. Ray Smoke Lucas stays closest to the throne. He buys 80 acres adjacent to the old tobacco auction house, becoming a farmer who grows paranoia alongside his crop. Every morning, Smoke walks his property line, checking for disturbances, watching for federal surveillance, guarding Frank's secret like a priest guards confession. Every unfamiliar car becomes Dia. Every stranger asking directions becomes an undercover agent. Every phone call might be wiretapped. He lives free, but imprisoned, wealthy, but broke. The first real test comes in 1987. Carl's wife Linda gets diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The oncologist in Raleigh speaks in numbers that might as well be foreign language. $60,000 for treatment. Experimental drugs in Houston cost double that. Carl sits in a hospital waiting room that smells like disinfectant and desperation, fluorescent lights humming like angry insects. His bank account holds $437. 30 miles away, $50 million waits in waterproof containers. He drives to within a mile of the burial site that night. Parks his rig on a dirt road, engine idling, hands shaking on the steering wheel. He could walk. He could dig. He could save her life. But Frank's voice echoes in his memory. Not for spending. For surviving. Carl makes the choice that kills part of his soul. He watches Linda die in a shared hospital room because loyalty weighs more than love. He pays for her casket on a payment plan that takes 3 years to complete. 1995 brings Tommy's breaking point. His son Michael dies in a motorcycle accident on Highway 1 at 2:14 a.m. Wet asphalt. Too much speed. Physics wins. The funeral director quotes $8,000 for a proper burial. Tommy doesn't have 800. He drives north that night, drunk on grief and bourbon, a shovel rattling in his truck bed. He gets as far as the Georgia border before he pulls over, vomiting on the roadside. He turns around, goes back to Key West, buries his boy with money borrowed from loan sharks who charge interest in blood. 2008 delivers Heavy's crucible. The economy collapses. Construction work evaporates. The bank takes his cabin for back taxes. For 6 months, Heavy lives in his pickup truck, bathing in gas station restrooms, eating from dumpsters behind grocery stores. He's a homeless millionaire, owning a quarter share of a fortune while freezing through mountain nights. The irony tastes like rust and shame. They meet every few years to count sins and years. Different cities, different names. Always the same question from Smoke, you touch it? Always the same answer, no. Each time the word gets heavier. 2010 changes everything. A cable documentary airs, The Country Boys, Frank Lucas's Invisible Army. Suddenly their names exist in public record. Amateur investigators start asking questions in Greensboro. The secret has an audience, and audiences demand answers. Then 2015 arrives like Judgment Day. Frank Lucas walks out of federal prison, old and frail and carrying secrets heavier than chains. The Country Boys expect resurrection. They expect permission to end 4 decades of silence. Frank refuses. Not yet, he tells Smoke in a parking lot conversation nobody else hears. The ghosts aren't finished with us. The money stays buried. The silence continues. And 4 old men keep guarding a fortune that guards them back, waiting for ghosts to finish their eternal hunt. Frank Lucas is dying by inches in a Newark apartment that costs $900 monthly and smells like old coffee and pharmaceutical regret. The man who once moved $1 million weekly now stocks shelves at a warehouse for $12 an hour. His hands shake from diabetes that steals circulation like a thief. His heart beats irregular rhythms that spell trouble in any language. But Frank refuses the buried money like a priest refuses sin, because he knows the difference between wealth and curse. The legend lives in 3 rooms and peeling paint. No marble floors, no chinchilla coats, just a recliner with a broken handle and a television that shows more courtroom dramas than celebrations. Journalists still circle, wanting the same thing the streets always wanted, coordinates to resurrection. Frank gives them nothing. He smiles, tells half-truths, lets them chase ghosts while the real ghost sleeps in Carolina clay, waiting for permission to wake. Tommy visits first in 2016, drives 16 hours straight from Key West, parks outside Frank's building at dawn, blocks his path to work. Cancer is chewing him from inside, and medical bills are chewing what's left of his dignity. I kept your secret 40 years, Tommy rasps, voice dry as paper, skin like leather from decades of sun and bourbon. I buried my wife broke. I buried my son broke. I'm dying of cancer, Frank. Let me die with something to leave behind. Frank looks at Tommy like looking at a mirror reflecting younger ghosts. That money's cursed, Frank says, voice carrying the weight of decades. Every dollar bought with blood demands blood payment. You dig it up, you're not spending cash, you're spending your soul. Carl comes next in 2017. His grandson needs heart surgery. $30,000 separating living from dying. Carl sits across from Frank in a diner booth, hands folded like prayer, voice breaking like old glass. My blood is dying, Carl whispers. I can save him. Just give me permission. Frank stares at coffee gone cold, seeing ghosts in the steam. You save him with that money, you curse him. That cash carries every overdose, every bullet, every mother crying in Harlem church basements. You want that weight on a child's shoulders? Heavy appears in 2018, thinner than his name suggests, wearing donated clothes from church charity boxes. He doesn't plead, just sits beside Frank on a park bench, watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. "I'm living in my truck again," Heavy says quietly. 69 years old, bathing in McDonald's bathrooms, and I'm guarding a fortune that's guarding nothing. Frank nods slowly, understanding the irony that tastes like rust and shame. You're guarding yourself. That money would destroy you faster than poverty ever could. Only Smoke understands. But even Smoke grows tired. He visits monthly, bringing groceries Frank's too proud to accept, checking on the king who abdicated his throne. During one visit in early 2019, Smoke asks the question haunting them all, "What was the point, Frank? 40 years of silence protecting what?" Frank looks out at Newark streets that don't remember his name. "We protected you from becoming Nicky Barnes, from needing to be seen, needing to flash, needing to prove you were kings. Barnes died broke and forgotten because he needed spotlights. You're alive because you stayed in shadows." But Frank's body betrays his philosophy. By spring 2019, he's hospitalized twice monthly. His wife Julie sits beside hospital beds, watching machines measure the distance between life and death. "You're going to die," Julie tells him during one vigil, "and leave those men with nothing but ghosts." Frank's response comes weighted with blood and calculation. "If I give them that money, I'm not leaving them with ghosts. I'm turning them into ghosts." Money like that doesn't set you free. It makes you visible, and visible men die. May 2019 brings the final test. Frank collapses in his kitchen, chest exploding with pain that feels like shotgun blasts. Julie screams for help. As paramedics load him onto the stretcher, Smoke appears in the doorway, sensing the end approaching like wolves sense wounded prey. Frank grabs Smoke's wrist with strength that shouldn't exist in dying men. "The tobacco barn," Frank whispers, eyes wide with terror and regret. "The old auction house. 3rd row, 7th post. If I don't make it, you decide who's worthy." The ambulance doors slam shut, and for the first time in 41 years, the location of $50 million exists in someone's mind without Frank Lucas controlling the narrative. November 15th, 2019. 3 days since Frank Lucas died in a New Jersey hospital room, taking 41 years of secrets with him to the grave. The truck stop diner outside Raleigh hums with fluorescent lights that flicker like dying stars. The coffee tastes like battery acid and broken promises. In the back booth, 4 old men sit with their backs to the wall, surrounded by the smell of burnt coffee and the weight of unfinished business. Tommy Briggs looks worse than death warmed over. Stage 4 lung cancer has hollowed him out, leaving only skin stretched over bone and a cough that sounds like rattling chains. He lights a Marlboro despite the no smoking sign because rules don't apply to dead men walking. "Frank's dead?" Tommy rasps, voice like gravel grinding glass. "The feds moved on years ago. We earned this money with our silence. 41 years of keeping our mouths shut while the world forgot we existed. That's the price. We paid it. Now we collect." Carl Dupree wraps his hands around his coffee mug like it's the only solid thing in a liquid world. His grandson is 8 years old with a heart defect requiring surgery that costs more than Carl will earn in 5 years of driving trucks. "I kept the code," Carl says quietly. "I never talked, never flashed, never broke. I watched my wife die because I wouldn't touch that money. But I can't watch my grandson die while $50 million rots in the ground 30 miles from here." Jerome Heavy Johnson sits like a mountain bearing weather, massive shoulders hunched, jaw working like he's chewing on old violence. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of pure loyalty uncut by rationalization. Frank said the money was cursed. Said touching it would wake ghosts we can't handle. You dig it up. You bring every death, every overdose, every broken family with it. That's not wealth. That's haunting. Ray Smoke Lucas watches them all, the keeper of secrets, the guardian of coordinates burned into his memory like brands. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a Polaroid photograph. Grainy, taken with flash in darkness. It shows the corner of a blue plastic barrel protruding from red clay soil. The date stamp reads yesterday. I went there, Smoke says. The table goes silent. Even the fluorescent hum seems to vanish. Didn't dig it up, just confirmed. Third row, seventh post, exactly where Frank said. The auction house is collapsing, but the foundation's solid. The money's real. $50 million in cash wrapped in waterproof containers, buried under 41 years of dirt and discipline. The photograph transforms theory into physics. For 4 decades, the money existed as idea, as test, as abstract burden. Now it's concrete, real, claimable. But Smoke isn't finished destroying their assumptions. He leans closer, voice dropping to a frequency only they can hear. We're not the only ones who know anymore. Frank talked before he went. Not to the feds, to his blood. He told his son about the general area. Not the exact spot, but enough to start looking. The temperature in the booth drops 20 degrees. Frank's son represents everything they despise: loud, entitled, flashy. A man who thinks inheritance equals earning. A man who never stood in rain guarding shipments, never sat in cells keeping his mouth shut, never sacrificed anything except entitlement to his father's legend. He's been hiring investigators, Smoke continues, asking questions in Greensboro, buying maps of old property lines, getting close, maybe days away, maybe hours. The impossible choice crystallizes. They can't leave it for someone who didn't earn it through 4 decades of silence. The unworthy cannot inherit what the worthy bled to protect. Carl looks at the photograph, then at his phone displaying another text about medical bills. So we kept it safe for 41 years, so Frank's son could waltz in and take it? That's the reward for loyalty? Tommy's laugh comes bitter as burnt coffee. Frank wanted to test our character? Here's the test. Do we let blood that never earned the throne claim what we guarded with our lives? Heavy stands up slowly, the booth creaking under his weight. When Heavy rises, it feels like a verdict taking shape. He doesn't look like an old man anymore. He looks like the enforcer who once cleared Harlem corners with a glance. If we're doing this, Heavy says, voice carrying the finality of mountains making decisions, we do it tonight. And if Frank's son shows up, he doesn't finish the sentence. In the world of the country boys, silence always speaks louder than threats. The unfinished words hang in the air like gun smoke that hasn't formed yet, carrying more weight than any completed promise. 4 men leave cash on the table for coffee they barely touched, and walk into November darkness, carrying shovels, flashlights, and 41 years of silence that's about to end in dirt and decision. The road to resurrection is paved with red clay and broken promises. Heavy's truck cuts through November darkness, headlights carving truth from shadows, carrying 4 old men toward the grave of an empire. No conversation, just the weight of 41 years pressing down like atmosphere on deep-sea divers. The only sounds are Tommy's rattling cough and the crunch of gravel that hasn't felt rubber since Frank Lucas was king. The tobacco auction house rises from kudzu and memory like the skeleton of a prehistoric beast. This is where Frank's grandfather sold Golden Leaf in the 1940s, where young Frank played hide-and-seek between auction rows, where an empire chose to bury its heart. The roof has collapsed in 3 places, allowing moonlight to slice through rot and time. It smells of wet wood, ancient tobacco, and ghosts that never learned to let go. They park a quarter-mile out and walk the rest. 4 old men carrying shovels like soldiers carry rifles, moving through overgrown fields with the discipline that kept them alive when flashier men died young. Inside the auction house, their footsteps echo off rotting beams that arch overhead like the ribs of a dead animal. Smoke counts the support posts aloud, voice cutting through 41 years of silence. 3rd row. 7th post. His boots stop on packed earth that looks no different from any other patch of North Carolina soil. But coordinates don't lie, neither does Frank Lucas, even in death. They dig in shifts. Tommy manages 3 shovelfuls before his cancer-ravaged lungs force him to stop, wheezing like punctured bellows. Carl takes over, each thrust of the shovel a meditation on sacrifice. His wife died here, metaphorically, in this dirt, when he chose loyalty over her life. Heavy digs like a machine, methodical and relentless, turning earth that hasn't been disturbed since 1978. Each shovelful represents another year of silence. 1979, 1980, 1981. The decades pile beside the growing hole like evidence of time served. 3 feet down, then 4. At 4 feet deep, metal strikes plastic with a hollow thud that stops the world. They clear the dirt with their hands now, desperate, clawing at red clay like men trying to escape their own graves. Blue industrial barrels emerge, 6 total, sealed with waterproof wax and tape that somehow survived 4 decades underground. Heavy pries the lid off the first barrel with a crowbar that screams against metal. The smell hits them instantly. Not rot, not mold. The smell of old paper and ink and preserved time. Smoke shines his flashlight inside. Stacks of $100 bills, bound in rubber bands that have long since snapped. Faces of Benjamin Franklin staring up from 1974, 1976, 1977. $50 million in 1970s currency, perfectly preserved in darkness, organized with the discipline that defined Frank's empire. For one crystallized moment, they're not broke old men guarding secrets. They're kings reclaiming their throne. Tommy falls to his knees, coughing blood, running his hands through cash like touching salvation. Carl closes his eyes, seeing his grandson's surgery paid in full, seeing dignity restored to sacrifice. Heavy just stares. 41 years of poverty ending in one impossible moment. Then headlights shatter the darkness. 3 vehicles moving fast, no attempt at stealth. The lead car is a black Mercedes that costs more than the country boys earned in the last decade combined. It parks 50 yards away, high beams illuminating the scene like a stage set for judgment. Frank's son emerges flanked by 2 men who move like professionals accustomed to violence. Designer leather jacket, New York swagger. The arrogance of men who inherit rather than earn. He looks at the barrels, at the money, at 4 old men standing in a hole they dug with their own hands. "Step away from my father's money," Frank's son says, voice carrying entitlement like armor. "You were just employees. Good employees, sure. Loyal. But employees don't get to keep what belongs to the family." Smoke steps forward, still holding his shovel, dirt under his fingernails, 41 years of discipline carved into his face like scripture. "Your father didn't leave you money. He left you a test. The same test he gave us. Are you willing to earn it? Or do you just want to take it?" Frank's son laughs, sharp and ugly, echoing off rotting wood. "Earn it? I earned it the day I was born with his name. You think 40 years of driving trucks makes you family? You're the help. You always were the help." The binary opposition crystallizes. Somebody versus nobody. Crowned by birth versus crowned by blood spilled in trenches. The son wants the harvest without the planting. The reward without the sacrifice. Heavy looks at the barrels, then at Frank's son, then at his brothers in silence. His voice rumbles like approaching thunder. "You're right. It belongs to family." Heavy reaches into his jacket. Not for a gun, for a road flare. He cracks it against the shovel blade with the sound of breaking bones. It hisses to life, spitting red sparks, a magnesium star burning at 3,000 degrees. "What are you doing?" Frank's son screams, but Heavy doesn't answer with words. He answers with action that speaks louder than threats ever could. Heavy drops the flare into the open barrel. The old paper catches instantly. Flames roar upward, blue and orange, feeding on $50 million of oxygen and ink and preserved greed. Heavy kicks the barrel over, spilling burning cash onto the auction house floor. The other barrels catch. The dry timber ignites. 41 years of discipline burns brighter than the sun. "You insane old fool." Frank's son shouts, retreating from heat that burns hotter than his entitlement. His hired muscle backs away, terrified by fire that consumes more than money. Smoke watches flames climb the walls, understanding finally dawning like sunrise after the longest night. Frank said the money was for resurrection. He was right. We just had to burn the past to be born again. The sun flees as support beams begin to groan. The country boys walk out slowly, heat at their backs, light of $50 million casting long shadows into November darkness. They leave the money. They leave the legacy. They leave the ghosts to burn with the gold. Sirens wail in the distance, but they arrive too late. The legend is already ash. The curse is already lifted. The test is finally complete. 6 months later, the mathematics of loyalty calculate differently than the mathematics of wealth. Tommy dies in Key West hospice with state-issued sheets, but a country boy holding his hand, making sure he doesn't leave this world alone. Carl's grandson gets his surgery funded by a community fundraiser that raises money, because sometimes the internet rewards good stories over blood money. Heavy works at a mountain scrapyard, paid in cash, living in a rented room, sleeping better than he has in 40 years, because dreams don't carry the weight of buried secrets anymore. Smoke still walks the old property lines where nothing grows except tobacco and peace. They never got rich. They never claimed the throne built for them with discipline and silence, but they kept the one thing money can't buy and crime can't guarantee. They kept their souls. The final question burns eternal as the ashes of $50 million. Was loyalty worth more than wealth? Or was wealth never worth what loyalty cost? In the end, 4 old men chose to be legends rather than rich men. They chose to be remembered for what they wouldn't take rather than what they could have claimed. And in the mathematics of the underworld, that's the only profit that compounds interest forever.